Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out Indy Handshake, the wrestling podcast. My name is Paul Ponte. I am joined today by Matt Carlos. How are we doing today?
Hey, good. How's it going? Real good this morning. Doing good. Excited to be on the show, too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on. I've had on a lot of people you've wrestled with on the show. So having you on is, I like to try to find connections wherever I can. For instance, I'm going to be interviewing someone next week after this. It's going to be a surprise, but it's someone else deeply involved with you.
Oh, very cool.
So let's start off, with the typical stuff here, how we got started in wrestling. But more important to me is how you transition from that into finding out about the mystical world of independent wrestling.
Okay, cool. So with just how I started with wrestling, the first memory I have is watching Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan WrestleMania 6. It must have been some kind of rented videotape somewhere that we got. I don't think we watched it live. And then from then on, I was hooked. All the colors, all the bright lights, and these larger than life characters totally hooked me from day one. Before I knew it, I had all the little action figures, wrestling ring, the blue Hasbro wrestling ring set up, and all the action figures go with it. And then I just created my own world from there. Whenever I wasn't watching it, I was doing it with my figures and stuff. So I was always hooked from there. And then, of course, hang out at the thrifties and read the magazines and, go to the stores, buy whatever movies they released then, revolved around wrestling, and pretty much grew up with it ever since I was young. And then there was a big boom in middle school for me, when The Rock and Stone Cold, the Attitude Era got real popular, where all of a sudden everyone liked wrestling. But, whenever you get it, it's all good. Everyone loves wrestling, so that's cool. And then I would say that was my teen years where everyone got in. And then probably a little bit in the middle of high school, I figured out about indie wrestling. I went to high school in Newark. I went to high school in Union City. And then we kind of mentioned in the little pre-show of us talking and meeting each other with BTW. That was one of the first indie shows I ever found out about. I was at like I said, in high school, going to the movies or something. We went to the burger joint afterwards, and then it was actually Wild Storm who was there working at the burger joint across the street, and he saw I had a Hardy Boys shirt or something on. He's like, "Oh, hey, you like the Hardy Boys? You like wrestling? You should check out this indie show." And I
always be promoting.
Totally. And you never really know how much that one little "Oh, hey, you should check this out." It really hooks people to go because they're just like us, where they love wrestling when they were growing up, or I was into it then, but not so much now. But I'll support you. I'll check it out. So it's kind of a really cool little thing, and that was my first introduction was BTW from there. And then I just never really did anything solid when I was there. I hung out, helped set up the ring and hung around, but nothing really. Maybe I went once to grab waters or something like that, but I never did any official kind of training there or anything like that. I think I was just too young at the time. But I know listening to Dark Sheik's interview, she got started way earlier than in mid-teens, but I just don't think for me I was ready at that time. So waited a couple more years, and then I kind of hung around. The other place I went to was Pro Wrestling Iron. Funny enough, I was just a little kid with a camcorder and some DV tapes, and I would just say, "Oh, can I record you guys at show?" And then I'd give them the DV tapes afterwards, and then never really hear anything or see anything, or hey, let's get you back, but that only happened for a couple shows, and I was only really attending those shows kind of towards the end of it, where it started to go down, and there was maybe 6 people in the crowd, but some of those I remember being the best wrestling shows ever, like Vinny Massaro, who else was out there? Ray Kujimura, guys like that. It was so crazy. Even I think some of the early Sacramento guys, I remember seeing Ryan Crowley out there doing the arcade gimmick. Virgil also, love Virgil. But yeah, I remember being a little camera kid and just holding it there. And then I did that for maybe a little bit, but then they shut down. And then, of course, not too far away from Pro Wrestling Iron was APW, not to be too long-winded, holy moly. APW, and that's where I officially started to train there. Called Roland, got signed up, started January 2006.
Who was training at that time?
At that time, this was like Venice DeMarco's first class he was running. Typically, it was Dana Lee, karaoke kid. He was doing it at that time. He was doing like semi-pros, so they halved it up between beginner, semi-pro, and Venice DeMarco was doing the beginner. So it was like 25 guys, and 25 guys became 12. 12 was 6. It lasted for 6 for a good minute, and then 6 became 4. 4 became 2. 2 became 1, and then it's just me pretty much for my class. And it's like old school style, 2 years of training, 2.5, all the bumps, all the chops, all the heat, heat nights, cardio nights. That was fun. Guys like Kafu and Derek Sanders, like training you, telling you what to do and doing all these drills and blowing up, doing all that fun stuff when you're young in the business.
And when you started off doing that, obviously there's the shock of like, oh, now I'm taking bumps. Oh, okay, this hurts. But besides that, like, how did you find the other, more nuanced approaches, like, like psychology, putting a match together? How did you find that as far as like a learning curve for yourself?
I still think I kind of am always learning, of course, but the bumps, like you said, they hurt, but it was like fun because like, oh shit, this is what I've been waiting for. This is it,
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like the psychology of a match and stuff, I think probably it was a little more maybe of a bigger deal than I made it, because it is really easy when you calm down and think about it and not overthink. But when you're young and like, oh, I got to get this move in and I want to show everybody that I could do this, that like, then it really gets confusing. But now as I go into matches, like, I'll just, look at the fans and, flick my hair, do something cocky here. And then I know that's more going to get me more heat than trying to hit a guy 1,000 times with my forearm. It's not that strong style. It's more of like an entertainment kind of storytelling. So that was kind of like a bit of a shocker, but I feel like I adapted well and kind of like to always throw in a little bit of different creative ways of getting into different times in the match and stuff like that.
And have you found any outside inspirations to moves that you want to do in the ring or things that you want to do? For instance, like when I talked to Vinny Massaro, he mentioned, grabbing stuff off of Tekken video games and being like, I'm going to do a move based on this thing here. And like now he has like a Cormier driver that he does. That's yeah. And so like, did you have any inspiration like that came outside the world of wrestling?
I would say not as far as like moves go, because like all my things I do are very much like wrestling based, but I do steal like little things here and there from different areas. Like some will be like high flying, some will be like luchas. I've even stolen some things from like minis a little bit. I kind of see what they do and how I could adapt it to myself, and I've done that. But other things like I'll always try to take inspiration from anything, whether it's like music. Live music is kind of a lot of what I've been kind of trying to reach from lately, because at Hoodslam we always like had the live band there and the fans were reacting to it. So like when you come out with a band playing your music, it like is such an adrenaline rush. But in this COVID era, it's kind of hard to like match that now. So I've even finding myself looking at like YouTube videos of like old live shows of like Silverchair, or like Foo Fighters, or old like live concerts to kind of find what attracts people in like a live setting. So like once we do come back, I'll be ready for it. So I guess like in music and, and sometimes in movies too, like kind of steal a little funny nuanced things. Like one of my favorite things, I don't think people think it's really, could even really pick it up, but like a lot of times the things that go right in my way in a match, like I always let out the, oh shit, like kind of like a ode to Back to the Future, like falling into the manure truck kind of a deal. So I'll always do like little things like that. So like if you catch on, you get it, it's cool. But if not, like, you know, it still makes sense to what's going on. You know, it's not like I'm doing it to be take too much from the match. I mean, I was still on point, you know.
Earlier on, you also started wrestling a bit for Pro Wrestling Revolution. How did you find, you know, once you learn kind of one style and then you go into, you know, working with like lucha crowds and lucha style, how did you find the differences between American style, lucha style, that kind of stuff?
It's like almost in two parts in that question. Cause at first I first came over to Pro Wrestling Revolution, I had this spot where I'd always wrestle strongman John Anderson. Legit strong man. He's been to Japan. He's done so much like in his career already. So it was like me and Dave Dutra. We're doing a big disco dancing character tag team at the time, and we'd come out there dancing with all of our stuff on, and then out comes the strong man to destroy both of us. And so then it was still very like your American style of we're getting tossed around, we're getting beat up, we're getting all these big elbows, you know, body presses onto each other, like big splashes in the corner. We're getting everything pretty much still American style. But it was almost like once he kind of moved on and that run with us was over, where a bit of that athletic, like quick tag team stuff still got over to a sense. But kind of once I started getting into a singles, I realized how much like, oh, I can't just be, you know, showing up and expecting to hang with all these legit like luchador styles. And like I'd go in and try to do a little bit more during training, or I'd try to go in and Gabe would have us come in and he'd do seminars and stuff like that, which I wish I took more advantage of. Because like if I did that at the time, I realized how much I could have probably taken that in a lucha style. But at the time, being young, I just felt like I was trying to click with what I wanted to do, but it just wasn't working for me, you know? So still overall really good experience working there. And I always had fun on those shows. They always had such big crowds and strong reactions, and always a fun learning experience there.
So speaking of styles, you know, when you start off, you probably have an idea in mind of like, this is the kind of wrestler I'm going to be. Mm-hmm. Now, did that change once you actually started training, and if it did, how did it morph?
I would say it definitely changed because, you know, being a lighter guy, and especially in a big cosmetic big man's business, you have to do something if you're a small guy. And, you know, no surprise, I'm a small guy. So I always thought I had to do like flips. I always thought I had to do the fancy moves and backflip moonsault and all that. And I kind of was even training that way, and I was training with Jardy France a little bit. He was doing a lot of, you know, flip stuff, backflips, moonsaults. So I was training with him doing that stuff. And then I would say it was early on in the when I was training. It was one day where I lived pretty close to the garage, so I jogged over there, did a little in-ring workout, tried to do some high-flying stuff, and then that's when I kind of realized, like, yeah, maybe this stuff isn't for me, because I was on the top rope, and we just learned flipping to our feet from the top rope, landing in the mat, and I did one of those and just really, like, jammed my ankle, and it kind of rocked my world, because, like, as my legit job I have to, you know, make a living, really affects it because it's construction work. So like that's moving every day. So yeah, I realized then it's like, hey, I can't be doing all these backflip moonsaults, high flying things. It's not that I can't do it, because like, you know, I came back, you know, my ankle wasn't that bad. I tried it again. I did it. I hit it. But it's like, well, if there's other guys who are doing it and they already like feel like I don't want to do something somebody else is doing anyway. So that's where the creativity comes in, of finding other things to do in the ring that is like different, that a guy like who's my size, my style could do that maybe not everybody can. And that's where like coming into watching the minis or the, you know, the luchadors, like taken from that style is where it really helped, like kind of do a mixture of my American style mixed with the lucha style, and plus my like creativity of like watching wrestling for like all my life to like pick apart all these little things and chop it up to see what works, you know?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, you know, especially the more traditionalist guys in pro wrestling, they like to like box lucha into one little thing. They're like, oh, lucha, it's all that flippy nonsense, blah, blah. It's like, well, no, that's not what lucha is. Like, lucha is a lot of things. Lucha can be a lot of submissions. Lucha can be a lot of ground game. Like, there's a whole lot more going on. And then especially with the minis, I've said it before on here, but like, you know, the American audience has been conditioned to kind of like, especially in the old days, like laugh at minis. Like, oh, isn't it funny? Haha. But like, no, like minis are over as shit in Mexico. And they're spectacular.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of like reworking what people's preconceived notions of what it is that you're doing, you know?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about Hoodslam. We talked about Dark Sheik. I had her on here. And but you've been into Hoodslam for a while now, since what, 2012?
I would say so. I'm always fuzzy with dates, but I would say so. Whenever they started after their first year, like that's probably when I came on, was after the first year. And then, you know, I'd always hear like the boys talking about it, like, oh, you know, Hoodslam, come out. I was like, oh, okay, sure, why not? But I never really did for that first few times. But then I was like, oh no, I want to check this out. And it was still at the warehouse. It was probably like the last few warehouse shows they did before we moved over to the opera house over there. But I'm awesome. You know, it's everything you would want. It's like fun characters. It's like SNL. It's like, you know, movies all mixed, rock concert all mixed into one. So I always kind of enjoyed it and kind of liked it out there. Yeah.
And how did you notice like the evolution of it since you were there so early in, and it kind of has now become this like cult phenomenon? It's this big thing, you know, the Chronicle's writing articles about it, you know, in mainstream newspapers. Like, so how did you notice the evolution of it? And then like, did you notice it at the time? Like, were you like, oh, wow, this is getting big? Or does it just kind of like a slow thing? So you're like, you know, you don't see the changes when you see it all every time. You know what I mean?
I would say I definitely saw the changes because, you know how it was in the mid 2000s of shows, like maybe 40 people on a good night, maybe 75 on the best nights, maybe 100, 200. But like with Hoodslam, like that's what it was. Maybe, you know, all of our friends packed into a warehouse. That could be 20 people. It could be like, you know, 60 people. But then once we got to the opera house, like, it all started changing from there, because I think it was just word of mouth, and it was like from all this big opera house and like all this open space to like all these people filling that open space, the wall to wall people. The transition was pretty crazy, because like there you are, legit 50 people, you know, backstage hands or like girlfriends or boyfriends or whoever, family members. And then it's like, no, this is legit crowds of people who want to see what we're doing.
This is real, basically.
Exactly. to sort of see it start so small, and then to be a part of it too was like, I always I don't feel like I could take full credit like for being there since day one-ish, but like I was like 1 year-ish, I would think, like, you know, and seeing it rise from there. I mean, it's been amazing, because like I'm sure it's been said, but it's like, you know, the land of misfit toys, of like guys who weren't being used in other companies, or guys who were always like the undercard guys. And now we're just here having fun, doing different characters, doing different things, being utilized in different ways, and getting over. Like, I'll always attribute like kind of all my live promo stuff to Hoodslam, because that's the first real place I got a live mic in front of like a really hot crowd. And so like I really attribute a lot of my learning to doing live promos there. But yeah, the evolution of it has been insane. I mean, like even to the point where like I have always heard like when people throw in money, like that's like an old school thing, like from like Lucha Libre, where like where they throw it in after the show. And like before COVID, we got to a point where people are throwing money in during the entrance, during the match, after the match, like laying there selling. People are still throwing money in for tips. So like just to know that we got to that point, like I mean, I like that. I always like to take this saying from The Office, and Andy from The Office, he always says, "Yeah, I always wish you could know when the good old days are here before they go." And like, I always made sure to take like little mental notes of like, dude, we're doing it. Like, we're living the dream right here. It might not be for the big time money, but we get to do everything we want creatively. We get to wrestle the way we want and have fun while we're doing it. Like, always a great time looking back on Hoodslam, anything really.
Yeah, all I could think about now during COVID times is like all the times I didn't go to an indie show because I was like, I'll go next time. I'll go next time. I'll go next time. And now I'm like, fuck, I really wish there was some live wrestling I could go to right now.
Yeah, it definitely fills that little void of whatever it is to like, yeah, there's nothing like it really.
Yeah. And then, a lot of people, the Hoodslam, it kind of goes with a lot of the newer style of wrestling, the newer, people are incorporating everything into wrestling now, comedy, all this stuff. And a lot of people, Sheik mentioned it a bunch about people shitting on it. And it's just like, you left us with nothing. Like, what do you expect? And that's kind of like the way I look at it too, is where it's like, the indies, like you said, we're going 20 people to a show, and like things weren't working. And wrestling was not a boom anymore. So the average person wasn't going to an indie show just for shits and giggles. Like they didn't, so what you have to do is you have to think outside the box and do something that's going to draw people in. Sheik mentioned, I wouldn't even tell people it's a wrestling show. I would say, oh, there's a band, there's a bunch of crazy shit, people are dressed up, and then, what happens in a ring. And then like, that would like be the thing, and then people would come. So when you think about that, it's kind of like, wrestling, it is a sport. It is physical, but it's also show business, and you gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah. But, so when you, I don't know, what was the attitude around APW when you started out? Cause it is a little bit more in that, wrestling, I always say, is a little more old school than the world around it. So, what was the vibe early on about stuff like comedy wrestling when you started out? Like, did people were like, oh, don't be like those guys? Like, or was there any like opening to it? Like, do you not understand? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So like, as far as I like, from my experience seeing it, like, I was trained by Venice DeMarco, which like you could always say his character was like one of the stronger characters of like independent wrestling, being this like hot-headed Italian guy, which, comes across in like, whatever show it is, The Godfather, or whether it's like The Sopranos, like that's a hot topic thing, that's kind of a cool character. Kind of, but like a lot of times it would be comedy because people were chanting like, oh, where's my pizza, or stuff like that at him. So I always thought, oh, sure, it's funny, but these guys are going in there and handling business as a badass tag team. And then other times, like also in lucha, I see things where like there's like comedy spots or other things like that. So I always thought, okay, there is a spot for it. As far as like how like certain people felt about like as far as evolutioning and going into another company and doing stuff like that. I was always trained by Roland, and he was really old school, but Roland would always come up to the Hoodslam shows anyway, and he'd still check them out. So it's not like he was against them or anything like that. Sure, maybe he might have been past his bedtime a couple times at Hoodslam and fallen asleep, but he does that at every show, or he used to anyway. So as far as I'm concerned, like it's, no one's going to want the same thing out of wrestling that someone else is going to want. Like, just like nobody's Spotify playlists are all going to be the same. We all like our different flavors. We all like this to sing when we're happy. We like this to sing when we're sad. We like this to rock out when we're at the gym, whatever it is, So I kind of feel like it's, if it's not your thing, just look away. You don't have to bash it. If we're all in wrestling, we're all in music. He plays country, he plays rock and roll. He wrestles lucha, he wrestles strong style, But we don't have to bash each other to get to the end point. Let's just be the best in our categories. And if those lanes collide, tell a story that way, don't just bash it and get rid of it. Like, but I don't feel like I ever had to think like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. So, I'm not here anymore. This is the style I'm doing. I'm not doing this. Cause for a long time I would do like all the shows. I was doing Hoodslam, was doing APW, was doing PCW, was doing anything I could practically until like you just kind of run with a show that's running more often and takes care of you. So, and you kind of have loyalty there. So yeah.
Yeah, I like the fact that she mentioned that she built a lot of it on loyalty. Is like, who are the people that actually gave a shit about me? These are the people I'm going to book. And I love that idea because loyalty and wrestling, sometimes they don't go hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because at the time you could really see like the popularity of Hoodslam like building, whether it was like the names that were coming in and putting us over, whether it was like just the amount of people that were there, ticket sales, pre-sales selling out, whatever it was. Like you just want to be there because you're with your friends and you're creating this special thing. You're not being there because it's like, the flavor of the month. And, this flavor's lasted a lot longer than just a month too. It's been,
oh yeah,
decade, it's crazy.
And some of the PWG guys I talked to said the same thing, like about PWG. Once it started getting off, all of a sudden everyone's super friendly. Everyone's like, oh, hey, any room for me to get booked? And like all of a sudden, all of a sudden. Interesting.
Yeah, that's probably like my detriment too. Like I'm always just friendly to be friendly, not to like get booked anywhere. So like maybe I should be more meticulous about like, getting booked, but I'd rather just, just be nice and be natural and genuine.
You played, the Ryu character, and Hoodslam had video game shows. Later on, then Hoodslam, AEW does a show that has everyone as video game characters, not fully in character, but they're all dressed up like it. The Hoodslam account made a point the other day when they had a Broadway musical number on AEW. They're like, hey, Broadway musical, that sounds familiar. We've kind of done that before. So what do you think as a person like, who's part of this so-called small indie promotion that has these ideas, and then now you see them pop up in larger national television venues? Like, what is your idea there? Do you think that they knew about these things, or do you think it's all just a fun coincidence of wrestling?
There are some things I would say not much as far as like things that I've done, but like I would say there are definite things like customary to Hoodslam that you've seen pop up other places, whether it's like having the show in a bar. And sure, there've been wrestling shows at bars before, but never like the party atmosphere style of like fans right up to the ring and like kind of what we were doing. I saw that trend happening a lot more outside. As far as characters and stuff, like those are always tricky because like just like we kind of said with Spotify and stuff, people love things. Like we all kind of grew up in the same era or generation. It's definitely like, it definitely stings. Like it sucks because it's like, man, we did that like before and we, so that kind of stings, but more power to them. Like, if we like it, I'm sure other people like it and I'm sure they like it. And, if they could do it on a national level before we could, like, that's cool. But, if you're really like adamant about it, you could always look on YouTube and check the dates of like, oh, this was in 2008 or 2010, not, 2020, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't be too mad because otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. You've been training others as well now, right?
There was a period of time I was training. Yeah. I did a good amount of training with APW at the garage before it shut down, and then I did a little bit more training at Gold Rush Pro Wrestling over in Pacifica for maybe a couple years, a little bit there. Yeah.
So how did your wrestling sensibilities change, if they did at all, going from just performing to training others? Like what went through your mind as far as, the ideas that you have to convey? Did anything change as far as how you looked at wrestling once you started training other people to do it?
I don't think a lot had changed in like right off the bat in my mind, because I'm thinking like from the way I was trained to the way I wrestled was all pretty like seamless, and like I'm kind of never one to rule out anything. So it's, in a way, you're kind of like always learning in that way. So once it got to training, I would say maybe like it definitely helped keep myself more accountable for myself, because I'm not just, doing my own thing. Now I'm like kind of molding the early stages of like all these young careers, and like, I'm not really anybody. I'm just a kid on trying to help people out for, they need a trainer. Okay, I'll help train. I'm not like, oh, hey, I'm this big name and I'm gonna wrestle so good that, I want you to learn from me. It's just, my friends asked for help and I was trying to help them. So, really, I just kind of did what I could learn, passed on what I could pass on. And I always had a good time doing it. And if anything, I wish I realized how important it was a little more, just so I could maybe get a little bit more on my game at that time. Because I feel like at that time I was kind of like, oh, I'll just do training and I'll show up for shows. And I was a little bit more laxed. Like maybe it was I felt a little too secure of like, oh, well, I'm training on these shows. They'll have a spot for me, la, la, la. So maybe I got a little too lazy at that time. I wish if I, had that spot and kept my drive, I probably could have done more with the time I had there. But I kind of say everything happens for a reason, maybe I wasn't ready, whatever it was. Maybe I was just too young. I couldn't see the importance of it, but always enjoyed it and always had a good time raising up some kids and kind of doing what was done to me back at the time, but hopefully not as harsh, but maybe it's still as harsh. Who knows? Yeah.
And did you see any qualities in any of the students that you're like, oh man, that takes me back. That reminds me of when,
always when it comes to like I think it was always the group like motivating each other, because that was always a big thing. Like when I was in training, like it was, come on guys, let's do it, let's finish this last set, or hey, if one of us fucks up, we all fuck up, kind of a deal. Like it's always good seeing that, because like you kind of feel like a team, like because a lot of times, especially once you kind of start debuting and going on to do your own shows, it is kind of very much your own show. But as you're kind of going through these growing pains, there's no one else in the world that knows what you're going through other than people who are in wrestling training. So I think when you can relate to those people, it's always really nice to kind of have that. And there's some guys who I've trained with that are like, they're not even wrestling anymore, or we're not even that too friendly, but it's always nice to still see them, whether it be social media or whatever it is, to kind of keep in touch that way. Yeah.
And who are some of the Matt Carlos alumni that are still working?
Okay, so out of the people I know that are still working, there's Thunder Rosa, who's still working and doing her thing all around the world, a world champion. NWA couldn't be more happy for her. But like, I can only like, she is legit world trained. Like, I can't say like, oh, she happened because of me. Like, I was lucky enough to be a spoke on her wheel when she came around, because nothing was going to stop her. You could tell by the way she worked, by the way she outran everybody on the mile. Like there's nothing that was going to stop her. So I can't take credit for that. But yeah, Thunder was in my class at the time. Cowboy Charlie, who's doing Starboy, he's doing his thing out in GCW right now. He's doing his thing. And there's like other handful of guys that like maybe had a hand in, but I'm not going to fully take credit for them. And I will say that Dylan Drake was also Golden Boy Dylan Drake. He was doing the training alongside with me at the time. So I'd give him credit for that too. But those are just a few of the kids that are doing big things right now. And then, also Clint Armstrong, he's doing interviewing for the new pay-per-view Primetime Wrestling Network. He's out there doing his thing, so that's cool. And then you really just see a lot of people come in and come through. But yeah, those are probably and then if you're talking about the more local area, like Berkeley Brawler and kind of stuff like that, guys at Ball I've like been in my class and had fun training with and stuff.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Thunder Rosa, and she was rocking the Matt Carlos shirt. So always be promoting,
sweetheart. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. All right, brother. The booker has ran out. He says it's time to go home. So I got some questions here for you. Don't need to be fast in any way to your responses. Just some guidelines here to go through, but they're not super strict. So Here we go. Much like an indie show, sometimes it doesn't run on time. And Do you have any favorite road stories or specific stories that you're like from wrestling that you're like, this shit is crazy or this shit is hilarious? Just something that like it's like a go-to story when you're in a place that you're like, oh, let me tell you what happened.
I have a couple favorites. I'm not that great as like telling stories or like nailing the punchlines, but the two of the most memorable ones is like the first like real road story is probably like we were going, I think it was to LA. It was Sparky Ballard, myself, Rick Luxury, David Dutra, and myself, yeah. And then we stopped at the Lost Hills, or we also call it Handlebar Randall's, inside joke kind of deal, because somebody drew like a handlebar mustache on the Wendy's girl. So like we always thought that was funny anytime we passed through there going to LA. But like there was a time where we went in somewhere to get food, and then they moved the car across the street, and like I remember Dave like not maybe being like really like super legit scared about it, but he was definitely like, oh man, where are they? Where'd they go? La la la. I'm like, they're really just waiting for us to react. So, they're going to pop up any second. Like we just got food. So I opened up my sandwich or whatever it was. I started eating. You can see Dave was like on his phone, like just, and before you knew it, they pulled up right across the street. Oh, there they are. Okay, come on guys, let's go. Are you taking forever? Yeah. So that's always a fun one, because it was always funny. Like, the first one, they got us. And then I would say like the other crazy road story was like the amount of times I've like had to drive through like a snowstorm out of nowhere. I remember one time I was coming back from like Vegas, and it was in a van, and then I already drove 3 hours. This is after the show, of course. I drove 3 hours. My time's almost up, and then it starts snowing. And then they're like, oh, hey brother, well, it's going to take way longer if we pull off and switch drivers. So you might want to just drive a little bit through the snow. And then 3 hours later, I'm still driving. It's like 6 hours after the show in the snow. And then during the time, they have it on camera too somewhere. Somebody has a videotape of it where they're all like, oh yeah, it's very important. Just follow the path, because you don't want to. And right as he says it, the car in front of us is like going back and forth, swaying through the ice. It's like, oh shit. It was my first time ever driving out like that, or driving a bunch of people in the car, especially in a snowstorm. So yeah,
I was going to say East Bay, you're not exactly driving through snow every winter,
Yeah, and then right after that, like once we got to the stop, the sun's coming up. I'm like, it's 6 a.m. Like, all right, dude, I just need a second. Let me park, get here. I need to step outside, take a breath, and then we can get going. But that's also one of my fun stories. I was like, oh Jesus, like this is crazy.
Yeah, I remember one time I was driving back from LA, and there was like this crazy it was during wintertime. There was this crazy fog on 5 to like the point where I couldn't see like 5 feet ahead of my car. And I just remember like driving, like, what am I doing? Like, I can't see anything. What should I? And then like all of a sudden, like a car would just go like past you. You're like, I didn't even see them. You're just like, I don't like this at all.
Well, many trips like coming home from LA or like Disneyland like that, where we're it's after hours, and it's all, you can't even see 5 feet in front of you.
Yeah. If not, wrestling is a physical thing, but I also consider it a very creative thing. You're putting together matches, you're crafting characters. If not wrestling, what do you do creatively?
Creatively, I would say like in high school, I was like really into like video editing. Even like right after that was like video editing, taking the songs, clips of matches. There's probably a good string of like 2002 2004 Ring of Honor matches somewhere on my PC that I've got like to all this emo like Yellow Card and My Chemical Romance. Yeah, it's all hidden in the PC there somewhere. But I used to like do that. More lately, I know I've seen your like profile picture. You got a guitar, but 2 years ago, my wife got me a guitar for. It's always been a thing I always wanted to do. So it was really cool that she got it for me. I'm not any good either, but I just kind of like to mess around. So creatively, it's kind of fun to, just like in matches and wrestling, you have an idea and this is what you want to do. And sometimes it goes this direction, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works out better. Sometimes it works out worse. So I think like those like are creative things that I like to do. And if we break it down too, like there's also like times where like, my kid wants to build a fort. So we find creative ways to like do that too. So there are like a whole bunch of different things that kind of keep me busy. But those are probably the most things. Used to be like video editing more. Now it's probably more like music and staying stimulated that way.
Oh yeah, and the early 2000s. I would download a shit ton of wrestling clips on like Kazaa or LimeWire, and then and I would like put them together to like Newfound Glory or like some random, like all in like Windows Movie Maker. Like
totally, yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this. And I'm gonna tint all of it red because that looks cooler,
Check out this effect, ripple.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I love about this podcast. Like, yeah, you so like I feel like I'm so in the seat that you are. Like, you've seen the same things I have. Like, experienced the same love for wrestling in all aspects.
Yeah, it was so funny. I remember like the big one was like among wrestling circles was like, oh, if you look on Kazaa, like you'll find a clip of Brock Lesnar doing the shooting star, like, and that's like this super grainy ass video where you see him do it, and he does like a full gainer when he does it, like it looks amazing. So I remember like, and then you see that WrestleMania when he's finally about to do it, and you're like, here it goes, and then he lands on his face. And you're like, this was building for like 8 years of my life to seeing him do this on television, and he fucked it up.
Yeah, that was definitely the way to get him though, was doing it Kazaa style. There wasn't like YouTube where it was fully available, or like a lot of times I'm sure like you've heard of like it was like Click Wrestle, or they'd have a free video, like it was somebody I liked, I'm like, oh, I'm getting that one, Scotty Boots in it, boom.
Or like the early days of YouTube when it first started, when the videos could only be 10 minutes long. So if there was a match that was longer than that, it'd be part 1 of this match, part 2. They didn't upload part 2. What the fuck?
Those are my matches, man. Totally. Like even in like APW, I'd have a couple that are 2-parters, and like when I finally won like the APW internet title, it was like a 3-parter, like entrances to the end. So back in our day,
Yeah. What's your favorite move or hold that you don't use?
That I don't use. I like the shooting star press. I think that's cool. I also have always been like, being the small guy and always trying to steal what small guys do. Like 6-pack, you always used to do like the cross-face chicken wing. And I thought for like a small guy, that's a good idea, because like you don't have to be strong. Once you hook those joints in, like that guy's gonna tap out. So I would say I like that, and I don't do it. Also, the $1 Million Dream, I think that's cool. But like
nobody does that, huh?
I used to do it, or I'd want to do it, but then I'd kind of still do it just to steal for the spot of like $1 Million Dream, run up the corner, pin, no, like kind of a thing. But like I also stopped doing it because like Dave Dutra's his finishing move is like the double or nothing, where it kind of starts off in $1 Million Dream to a face bump, and I don't want to step on his toes. Not like I'm sure he doesn't even care or notice, but like just in my mind, I never want to step on it, anything close to anything anyone's doing. I just want to do it my style or my own way. So like I figured, if he's doing it, that's close enough. I'll do something else. So I started doing the Boston Crab, and you find other things.
So in indie wrestling, you get to wrestle in a lot of places. Gyms, halls, bars. People are drunk. People are rowdy. Lucha crowds can be crazy as well. What's the craziest fan interaction you've had?
Craziest fan interaction. Off the top of my head that I could think about, I remember like we were doing like the video game show at Hoodslam, and then the match before me was Sheik, and Sheik was in it, and something happened where somebody threw a quarter, because it's like a video game show. I guess that's a thing to do when you go somewhere, is throw quarters. But I never really thought that was a good idea. And then like he was yelling at the audience, or she was yelling at the audience, and then the audience were all throwing quarters, and I'm coming out right after this. I'm like, dude, I'm dressed as Ryu, bro. It's like gonna be nothing but quarters when I go out there. But luckily, like he set them all straight, and nothing too bad happened there. And I have never had like a fan run in or anything like that. I've seen like people on shows where they're drunk or something like that, or they try to do something, but that never really happened during my matches or anything where we had to get crazy. Nothing I can think of too right now. Yeah.
And besides hurting you, when you're working with someone in a match, what's the worst thing they could do in that match?
Maybe it's that thing where like people take too much time to like, okay, we get your character, you don't have to do any more, but like they take a little more time to really nail it in. It's like, come on, let's get going. Let's do it. I would say maybe like, forgetting a spot, but like, I've probably forgotten more spots than a lot more other people out there, as long as you can make it look good at the end. So even then, that's not that bad.
Have you had anyone maybe earlier in your career, especially, try to take advantage, like really like, mess up your shine in a match, or do something where they didn't let you get your shit in basically, or anything like that?
Nothing I can think of anything that someone did intentionally, but there have been a couple of times at a few shows where people maybe have gotten in the ring at like not knowing that they weren't supposed to be at the time. So there's probably one time where I had to be like, stay the fuck out of the ring, and like toss them out, like, like you're not, this isn't your spot,
Yeah.
But other than that, that hasn't been too bad. Oh, but I would say, to go back to like the worst thing, like one of the things I used to hate was like people who had like really sharp like fingernails, like before they'd wrestle, like, because I'm gonna rat him out, but my buddy Jody Christopherson, when I used to train with him, like he would always, like, I couldn't tell how, like behind my ears, across my neck, like down my face, like it looked like Anakin Skywalker. Like he'd like find a way, like I'd always be scratched up by him. I'm like, bro, you don't even have long nails. I don't even know how this is happening. But I think that'd probably be the worst, just because it's such a little thing that like doesn't even really matter. But maybe that was the worst thing you could do.
What's the hardest chop you've taken? Who's got the hardest chops?
Hardest chop. Definitely one of them. Billy Blade's got some good chops. And
Watt said the same thing.
I would say the one thing I like maybe more about his chops though is that he like lets you get one back. Like he's not just gonna chop the shit out of you and like, he'll like let you get it back too. So that's always good. I'm trying to think of more people like recently. The twins, the Cuzzies, definitely Stoner Brothers. They definitely got some good chops on them. And then, anybody who comes from a certain time have definitely got solid chops. I could say that. Like, if anyone who's like before that 2000 era, like all those boys, they got good chops. You don't got to worry about it. Oh, and John Anderson, of course. Strongman John Anderson. Yeah, he'll get some good ones in there.
When's the last time you were legitimately surprised by a worker you were in the ring with? You were just, it could be, you didn't really know too much about them. And when they worked, you were like, oh, wow, this guy's amazing. Or in another way, guys that you had no idea how it was going to be when you worked with them. And it turned out the chemistry was just amazing. You were like, holy shit, I had no idea we would click this easily in the ring.
When it comes to that question, I would say without a doubt, like it's like Dave Dutra, because we like I don't even know like why. Maybe I would say it's because we're trained from the same era, but maybe we're just so close in the same generation and age of what we've watched of wrestling that it like really clicks easily. I would even say with Dark Sheik, I have that same like kind of clicking ability where it could be like randomly in a match where it's like, oh, we got this. Like like everything else turns off in my mind. It's like, we're right where we're supposed to be. And this is exactly how we saw it. And it flows and it goes good. I would say that. Like new kids now, I'd say like Mansoor definitely had it when he was around here. When it comes to everything, presence, like in-ring, promo, he was really good. Manny Fabrino, and Steven Cesario. He's great too. In the ring, he's solid and always there every time I need him. I think he's real good. Have other people? I'm sure there's more. These are just guys like I probably just scrolled past like earlier today, and I was like, oh man, I really like them, and it just sticks in my mind right now. On the spot.
Has a booker tried to stiff you on money? And if so, what are some fun excuses as to why?
One of my favorite ones, like I was never big, like, oh, you're going to give me my money kind of guy. Like, we could talk it out. We could work it out. We'll figure something out. But probably the worst one was like, oh, I got the money in the ATM, but he was saying, I got the money. I just got to go to the ATM first. I'm like, well, dude, why didn't you go to the ATM before? He's like, well, if you really want to get paid, get in this line over here. Right. Well, everyone got in the line, so then it's like, yep, I guess you're going to the ATM.
Yeah.
But like I said, like it's just a funny wrestling story of well, and then they get you back, So I'm never really too concerned. They'll find a way to pay you if you're asking the right way. Whether it's PayPal, whether it's like next check or next payout, whatever it is. Like I don't think I've ever been wronged in that way. There've been some funny ways to get there for sure, but like I haven't been fully wronged, I don't think.
Yeah, I just love those stories. Some of the people I've talked to, they've been like, literally, like at the end of the show, they're like on opposite sides of the ring, and the other person just keeps like you can just tell, like trying to dodge them, like not be in the same area as them to not get asked. So random, but that's the way wrestling is, I guess. Let's see, what's the hardest you've laughed at an indie show?
Probably had to do with me like in like some serious spot where like. It's just like this street fight, death match, or garbage match, or something like that. We did one of those things, like a casket match, but you got to put your person in the trash compactor. So we did one of those, and like there's a spot in there where like I'm just gonna put the ladder on the guardrail, and then I'm gonna climb on the ladder, and then I'm going to jump off. It's going to be totally sturdy, but it wasn't. And I totally ate shit. So like, I think that was like a funny thing that really made me laugh. And then I think in the same match, like I was supposed to get choke slammed on top of the garbage can, but like I got choke slammed on it and then just went right through the doors. So I think, how did I end up here? Like, so that was kind of funny, but
just everything going wrong when it can
totally.
Yeah.
And there are other like I'm sure there have been countless times at Hoodslam where like because some of the boys come up and girls come up with the funniest things to do and ways to incorporate characters. So I would probably say my hardest laughs have probably been there and probably in the ring while it's happening too.
What's some of the worst gimmicks you've seen?
Worst gimmicks. That's a hard one. I can't really think of like anything that's maybe Simon Dean, like because I really love Nova, but hey, maybe not like that's in like the WWE, but can't really think of it to anything too much like I really hated,
Okay. How about this one's a little bit more what's some of the most overused gimmick you see? Like for instance, when the late 90s, early 2000s, I always use this example, so I apologize to anyone watching or listening to this, but I always say that a shit ton of guys in wrestling wanted to dress like Raven. Sure. For some reason, everyone had the cutoff t-shirt with the jeans and the boots with the white socks, like to the T. And it was just like, you vary it a little? Like some of them even had the chokers, and it's like, good God. Like
a lot of Hardy Boys too. I've seen a lot of Hardy Boys in my day.
Oh yeah. There was the Young Bucks. Like you just look at them when they were started out and you're like, oh, look, you're the Hardy Boys. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'd say one of those that like one time this kid, he came out like not in like a kind of looks like it, kind of resembles it, but he came out like in the exact thing like Kendrick and London used to come out in, like the shorts, the kick pads and all that. Like it was the exact copy. So I'd say maybe that was like one of the most scandalous, like crazy. I can't believe this is happening. Like, kind of feels. I
kind of like in wrestling to comedy in that way, in that like a lot of comedians when they start out, they emulate kind of what they want to be. So then like for like a longest time, like a lot of people sounded like Chappelle. A lot of people sounded like Dave Attell. A lot of people sounded like Louis C.K., before he became an asshole. Like basically like a lot of, so I think that happens a lot in wrestling where like you'll get a whole lot of Stone Colds out of nowhere. You get a whole lot of Hardy Boys. And then eventually you have to like find yourself and then get your own gimmick basically.
Yeah. That's always been one of the things I always try to do too. I always like, I never wanted to be the guys that like, oh, this is trending right now. Let me go do this spot. Like I always wanted to like just kind of pick and choose like little things and kind of mix it in my own way. Cause I feel like that's where the real artistry is. Like anyone could, be a carbon copy of the exact same thing. But if you're taking little parts of it and being inspired that way to make it something else and kind of make it a whole new part of the song, then I kind of feel like there's a little more art and, art to that than it is just, oh, tag, like, that's the thing I hate too, is like everybody at AJ Styles, you know, leapfrog, drop down, drop kick, you know, he's been doing it for years. He's still doing it. Let him do it, you know? Yeah. AJ Styles flip to the outside. Everyone's doing it. Let him do it, you know? You're not doing it as good as him, but I guess the new trend too is like the V triggers, the big knees. Like everyone's doing knees now. It's like, oh God, just let the guys do it, you know?
The knees need to calm down for sure.
Yeah.
I liked, I don't remember who it was who I was talking to now, but somebody mentioned wearing kick pads when you don't throw kicks. And I was like, now that bugs the shit out of me. Once they mentioned that, now I can't get out of my head. I watch a wrestling show and I'm just like, he's not throwing a single kick. Why is he wearing those things? It bugs me.
Cool, bro, you know?
Yeah. They were like, oh, he's probably too cheap to buy boots.
Yeah.
So this is, this isn't a shoot gotcha podcast. So for me, this question, you don't have to name any names if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Any former WWE, WCW, ECW, or just big name indie guys that you worked on the same show with that thought they were bigger than the show, acted like they were bigger than the show, just rubbed you the wrong way. Like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was who this person was. Anything like that?
You know, honestly, there'd probably been like, for me, probably like a handful, because they're like a couple, like I said, I'm a smaller, lightweight guy, so like in clothes and or in a sweater, like I look like a fan, you know, I don't really look like a wrestler too much, but like then, so I'm sure like there are a lot of people who I've shared locker rooms with where I'm going, hey man, how's it going? You know, go out to give the handshake. I'm like, oh hey buddy, you know, they give one of those, but like that's probably the worst. There hasn't been anything where there's anybody who's too big of a dickhead or too big of a diva. That is like affected me negatively anyway, that I could think of. Yeah, there hasn't been anything. I've been pretty lucky. Everyone I've been with have been pretty like legit and respectable too, that I could think of.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. So I'll end on this one. I call this the touchy-feely question of the podcast. It is your pure joy in wrestling, whether it be before, during, or after the match. Something that when it happens, you get the goosebumps and you're like, I fucking love this business. This is why I love wrestling.
I would say it's like anytime, like, as like a wrestler, or like, you know, a musician or whatever it is, like when you have that idea and then you kind of bank on that idea and you go it over in your head and over in your head, you're not telling anyone, it's just in your head, and then you kind of wait till it's like this perfect little idea, and then you're like, okay, let me go share it with somebody, and then you share it and like, oh hey, what if we did this tonight? And then, you know, because a lot of times I've got ideas when it comes to like wrestling, and a lot of times I've gotten a lot of maybe not tonight, or oh well, why don't we do this? And it's like completely not what I wanted to do, just something they wanted to do. You know? So, but I would say that's probably like my favorite, is when I like have this idea of a spot or like an idea or a moment in the match, and like it's played out perfectly, and then we're rewarded with like it getting over or looking good or anything like that. Because there are a lot of times where, like, especially early in my career, I thought like, well, let me just be quiet, let me just do what everyone says, la la la. And then I kind of like, well, I can make a difference by making it better if I just said something. Like, you know, I saw it myself. I knew it was going to happen. I could see it happening in my mind. So I'd say like now speaking up about things and being able to like see it forthcoming, see it in my mind, relay it to somebody else, have it happen and make it look cool as shit. Like that's probably like my biggest joy, is when like the spots come off super clean and that pop's there for it.
Yeah, I love that.
Also my entrance, like when I come out to the ring, because I used to have the band play me out, the Hoodslam band, and they have the raddest song that I was like, oh, can this be my entrance song? They released it on the album, and it was like, oh yeah, perfect, I'd love it. And then so I'd say that was probably the coolest thing too, is like Pure Joy's like because it's like a real slow, like kind of like nu metal style rock song, I guess, and then they're just kind of wailing in the back, and I'm taking my time, not really pumped up, but more like laid back, kind of free flowing my way out there. So I think that's kind of fun too, because it kind of like, oh, this guy's coming out different than everybody else, so we're probably gonna see something different in this match. And that's kind of like what I like to portray as I go out there. Yeah,
you like set the tone for people who might be seeing you for the first time.
Exactly. Perfect. Yep.
Very good. Well, brother, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Before we finish, though, please put yourself over, put over merch, anywhere people can check you out. And also maybe a match or two that you think, if somebody's not too familiar with your work, like the two that you're really proud of, or two or three that you're really proud of that you want them to check out.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Thank you. So if you're looking to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram, that Matt Carlos. That's me. I think I also got a YouTube that's got a lot of matches. It's either Matt Carlos Movement or that Matt Carlos, one or the other. It's probably a good handful of both. As far as matches you'd want to check out of mine, they're from way back when. I had a great set of matches. With me, Dave Dutra is going to be a good match. Probably one of my favorite matches ever is a match with me and Dark Sheik for that same internet title. I was when we were outside, there's a dive that just happened, and like we probably still had 10 more minutes to go, and I knew like when we were in that dive out spot, like, oh, it's happening. This is like exactly the way we wanted it, and it was perfect. So I'd say that match. More recently at Hoodslam, I was lucky enough to wrestle Brian Kendrick, who's like one of my heroes growing up in like indie wrestling in the 2000s, so that was like a big fight feel match for me at Hoodslam. So I'd say those are probably like the coolest ones I would check out.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you being on the show.
Right on. Thanks for having me. I love the podcast, and I can't wait to listen to all the others.